Hello and welcome to BBSN, and today I'm going to talk about an upcoming project involving boxing, running the Title Bout 2.5 version of the game, which to me is a little bit more stable than the 2013 version, which was quite buggy. So this is an older release but still a very solid fight sim engine and gives you very realistic and accurate results. So this project is called Random Chaos Boxing Association, and this consists of fighters from across history who debut randomly and create a modern boxing universe. So you'll see fighters from the 1800s all the way up to present time, anyone in between, greats, near greats, and never were going to be great. So this that'll basically be the makeup of the universe. And to start off here with our January 2018 rankings to begin the year in each division. And currently the heavyweight champion of the world is Sam McVeigh. And Sam McVeigh was a very skilled black fighter back in the days when there was, for all intents and purposes, a color line in boxing. He fought during the time period that Jack Johnson was the champion, and in fact Johnson did fight him prior to becoming champion. And which is kind of the ironic thing here is that Johnson, once he did defeat Tommy Burns in 1908 for the heavyweight title, he basically drew the color line himself. And reasons have been speculated. One is he felt he could defeat the white fighters at the time much easier than some of the tougher black opponents, such as McVeigh and Joe Jeanette and also Sam Langford. And to me, probably the overlying reason was financial. The American sporting public would pay to see Johnson take on a white contender because the movement back then in a very different, intolerant and racist society was that they did not want a black man to hold the heavyweight championship of the world. Therefore, they came out in droves to see the great white hopes of the era defeat Johnson. So it's a little bit of background of where McVeigh came from, and again, a very skilled fighter, and he is the current heavyweight champion with a record of 25-2, 22 KOs. And you see the current top 10 in the heavyweight division there. Notable Arthur DeQ from Italy, who is also the EBU champion, which you see down there listed under the regional champion section. Undefeated, but has not faced anyone near the caliber of McVeigh. And DeQ is likely to be the first title defense for McVeigh. In fact, they are working on finalizing those arrangements now. So he will get a chance to see what he's made of against the very best. Other notable names in the top 10, obviously Smokin' Joe Frazier, who has just checked into the rankings at number 2, undefeated at 18-0. John L. Sullivan, the Boston Strong Boy, the last of the bare knuckle champions and the first man to defend the heavyweight championship in an officially sanctioned Marquis of Queensberry gloved match. Bout he lost to James Corbett. And of course Buster Douglas, who upset Mike Tyson and held the title for a brief period before Evander Holyfield took it from him. And Ron Lyle, who was a contender, had the unfortunate timing of being at his best during an era of great heavyweights, which included Frazier, Ali, George Foreman, and the likes. Regional champions listed there below: the NABF champion Mac Foster of the United States, Arthur DeQ of Italy, previously talked about, and Frank Slavin from Australia is a Pacific Rim Boxing Council champion. Our light heavyweight rankings: the Slick Joey Maxim, veteran of 43 fights in this universe, is the current light heavyweight champion. Sam Langford, the number 1 contender from Canada, and again one of the fighters mentioned in the story about McVeigh. And Langford, he fought basically all comers. He fought between welterweight and heavyweight, and generally at about 170 pounds was his biggest fighting weight. So well below what current heavyweights would be considered. Also, the fact that he was 5'9" places him solidly in the light heavyweight division. And other notable names here: Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, a very artful champion from the teens, great boxer, not much power. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, light heavyweight champion during the 1970s, 80s period, which produced a lot of great light heavyweights. Joe Choinski, another fighter like Langford who fought mostly heavier opponents, as a light heavyweight division was not formed until the twilight of his career. Packed a very good punch and gave many top heavyweights of the day, including James Jeffrey and Jack Sharkey from Ireland, a great amount of trouble in the ring, and also defeated Jack Johnson by a second round KO in 1902, and both men were jailed at the time, and Johnson actually credits Choinski with helping him refine his game and make him a better fighter during that time they were incarcerated together. Archie Moore, probably arguably the greatest light heavyweight champion of all time, if not definitely top 3. And more current champions, Dennis Andres of England. And current regional champions, you can see NABF is Sam Langford, and Garnett Denny is the European Boxing Union champion from Northern Ireland. The PBC title currently vacant. Middleweight, Bob Fitzsimmons, again another man who held the heavyweight title and fought in an era where there was such a large weight variance between middleweight and heavyweight. Fitzsimmons honestly fought between 160 and 170 most of the time as well, so middleweight is a natural fit for him. Some big names in there, and actually this is a rather loaded division. Charles McCoy is the #1 contender. Gene Fulmer, who a native of Utah, where I spent most of my time growing up, #2. Recent champion Kelly Pavlik is ranked #3. Olson was another great fighter from the 50s. Harry Peppers dates back to the end of the 19th century. And of course at #8, just entering the rankings, the Michigan Assassin, Stanley Ketchel, one of the most tenacious and exciting fighters. His life was cut short at the age of 24 when he was murdered by a jealous farmhand, but a dominant champion in the early part of the 20th century, and also fought Jack Johnson and floored him, and about that the allegations there was that Johnson was to carry Ketchel, who he was quite a bit bigger than, and just for the fight to go the distance and be fairly competitive, with the understanding that neither man would take advantage of the other. Ketchel, despite the fact that he and Johnson were actually friends outside of the ring, took the opportunity to double cross Johnson and dropped him late in the fight. Johnson, if you've seen the video, look it up on YouTube. Johnson immediately got back up and floored Ketchel, knocking him out cold with the very first punch he threw after getting up. And interesting enough, you'll see him leaning against the ropes, fiddling with his glove. And the story goes there that he was actually picking a couple of Ketchel's teeth out of his boxing glove. He hit him so hard. Regional champions is listed: NABF, Carl Bobo Olsen, and Randy Turpin from England, the EBU champion. PBZ is vacant. Welterweight, some really good matchups here. Henry Armstrong is the current champion, and Hammer and Henry, one of the greatest welterweight title holders of all time. And you see this division is also fairly stacked. Rube Ferns, Ricky Hatton 1 and 2, and then the Motor City Cobra, Thomas the Hitman Hearns at #3, and he has actually already fought Armstrong twice and come out on the short end both times. In fact, we'll take a look at his history. And oops, welterweight. So you can see there, Hearns suffered a technical knockout at the hands of Henry Armstrong. Came back, beat Otto Cribb, earned a rematch with the then champion Armstrong, and lost a 15-round decision. So Hearns, who has also lost a decision to the current #1 contender, while he is not immediately in contention, at some point we should see him climb his way back into contention for this title. Moving down to lightweight, recently crowned champion Jim Watt, and he and Sammy Mandel, who was the reigning champion, fought to a draw. And in the last fight, an immediate rematch was ordered, and Jim Watt came through to capture the decision there and wrest the title from Mandel. These two will likely meet again at some point in the future to complete a very competitive trilogy. Other names here: Sean O'Grady, who was a champion in the early 80s. Lenny Mancini, who of course is the father of Boom Boom, and well documented that Ray Boom Boom Mancini became a boxer to win the title for his dad, which he did, as Lenny never had the opportunity, and perhaps his luck in this universe will turn out differently. But some more tough competitors here: Ad Wolgast, a former champion, Battling Nelson, and heavy hitter Andy Ganigan, nicknamed the Hawaiian Punch, was a lightweight around the time of O'Grady in the 80s. And Tony Canzonieri, of course, was a incredible champion back in the 30s or 30s, yeah. Regional champions: Lenny Mancini is the NABF champ. The European title is vacant, and Teru Kosaka is the PBC champion from Japan. And at featherweight, the explosive thin man Alexis Arguello is the current champion from Nicaragua. He is lined up for a bout with the undefeated Dick Finnegan, also 30-0, a bout that Arguello should be heavily favored in. Some big names here from the 80s: David Cote from Ghana, Torpedo Billy Murphy from the early part of the 20th century, and Hogan Bassey, another good champion, as well as Sugar Ramos. The regional champions: the North American Boxing Federation title is currently vacant. Jimmy Revy from England holds a European title, and David Cote the PBC title. And bantamweight, Sixto Escobar from Puerto Rico is the current world champion. And not a lot of well-known names here. Piero Rollo has obtained the #1 ranking spot with some upsets on his record. Probably the biggest threats to Escobar in the current top 10 would be #5 Terrible Terry McGovern from the U.S., a ferocious boxer with a very mean disposition, and another one who fought in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and was a dominant champion at that time. And of course the very slick boxing Philadelphian Jeff Chandler from the U.S. at #7. Exquisite boxer, some very exciting fights in the latter part of the 70s, early part of the 80s. And really outside of those two, nobody else stands out as an immediate threat to the title. Your regional champions, McGovern and Owen Moran from England, is the European title holder. And the flyweight division, biggest name here is probably #3 Yuri Arbatikov from Russia, and he was champion in the 80s as well. Charlie Magri around that time. Rai Ki-an from South Korea is the current champion, and actually, as big of a boxing historian as I am, I need to study up on him a little bit. Do not know a lot about him. Really was never a big follower of the flyweights in general overall. Midget Wolgast was another early 20th century fighter from the U.S., who should make some noise in this division. And here we have the current regional champions. Frankie Gennaro from the United States is the NABF title holder. Arbatikov is the European holder, and Yo-Sam Choi from South Korea is the Pacific Rim title holder currently. And top 10 prospects for 2018, and these would be fighters who are just entering the major level of boxing per se after having competed at the local level to build up their records. And biggest name on this list, Jack Dempsey, as well as welterweight, the original Joe Walcott, nicknamed the Barbados Demon. Middleweight Tony Zale is another one who will make noise in the competitive division, as well as Eno Benevenuti from Italy. And heavyweight George Godfrey, the Canadian, will also likely be a threat, or at least a top 10 contender in the heavyweight division, as will Panama L. Brown as in the flyweights. Notable fighters who are debuting in 2018, meaning they will have their first fights in this universe. Heavyweights: Oscar Bonavena from Argentina, a contender during the 60s and 70s. 80s contender Frank Bruno from England. Jack Delaney from the U.S. And Triple G will enter the universe, the current middleweight champion Gennady Golovkin. And then Frank Klaus, another high-quality middleweight from the U.S., will also begin his career this year. So that's basically the overview. And see, wanted to take a look at a couple of fighters here. Alexis Arguello, who has been a very dominant champion to date. And we'll look at his history. And you see in amongst his wins, some big wins here. George Dixon is a good one. Dave Sullivan, who is currently ranked 10th. Johnny McGrory, who probably did not deserve that opportunity at the title. But he's fought some top-notch fighters. He's defeated Davey Cote. And going back, really no one beyond that. So Finnegan probably will be his first big step up in competition. And if you look at Finnegan's record, the fighters on his ledger, really no one. He also holds a win over Cote, probably his best win on this ledger. So when they meet, it'll really be the first time either has been tested, but Arguello to me just has a lot more class and should handle that. And then wanted to go back and touch on Henry Armstrong real quick. Armstrong has really pretty much cleaned out this division. We know the 2 victories over Hearns. He also defeated the current NABF champion, Mysterious Billy Smith. And Rube Ferns, the #1 contender, Armstrong gave him his only loss. Mark Breland, a really touted U.S. amateur fighter who just never could seem to translate that to the pro game. Had some weaknesses with his chin. Ricky Hatton, another top 5 fighter, he knocked out in the 2nd round. So really looking at the current top 10, not a lot of fighters on there that he has not already beaten. And in fact, his first defense will probably be against either #4 Bobby Dykes or #5 Billy Lynch, who is undefeated. And lastly, just wanted to look at the heavyweight division. And we talked about Sam McVeigh. Some of his recent bouts, and he's had a couple of close ones. The unanimous decision over John L. Sullivan was not extremely dominant, and then a split decision, a 10-round split decision win over Jim Coffey in a non-title bout his last time out. And quite honestly, that was a bout that he should have dominated. If you look at Coffey, he is currently ranked much lower. And his record coming into the McVeigh fight is he had lost 3 of his last 4 to John L. Sullivan, Frank Slavin, the PBC champion, as well as a solid fighter Nick Burley, and his only win in that stretch was against Professor William Miller. And he gave McVeigh all he wanted. So despite McVeigh's skills, there are some who think he may be vulnerable for the title to be snatched at this time. So we will see. And again, his first title defense will be against Arthur DeCue, and not much expected there, but I do look for Smokin' Joe Frazier, if he gets a shot this year, to lift the belt from McVeigh. So the way this will work is non-title fights I will basically sim on a monthly basis. Obviously there's a ton of fighters in this universe. And I will focus on the title fights. All the world title fights I will record. And some of the regional title fights if it's a compelling matchup. And just taking the PBC for example. In this region, there's not a lot of solid fighters. You see here, Tom Heaney is probably actually the best current active fighter in the Pacific Rim Boxing Council heavyweight division. So, you know, not really fighters I'd say that are really compelling or that people would be clamoring to see. I may do the Bill Farnham Frank Slavin match should they ever meet. and they have not met yet, and that's a fight that makes sense because they're obviously both Australian. That fight would be huge there, and they're both pretty solid punchers, so that should end inside of the distance. So that would be a fight you would definitely see. You know, somebody like Bill Squires, who's 13-8, challenging for the title. Nobody wants to see that. So I'll just use my discretion there and do fights that, again, I think would be of interest. So that's basically it. Again, the Random Chaos Boxing Association, and currently ready to start the 2018 fight year. So until the next time, have a great day, everyone, and thank you for watching BBSN.